On Christmas, I arrived earlier than planned at the party at my in-laws' house. I was shocked when I heard my husband say, "Madison is pregnant, I'm about to be a father." I left quietly. 3 weeks later, everyone went pale when they saw. I still remember the feeling of absolute shock, like a punch to the gut, when I heard my husband's voice from the living room, "Madison is pregnant. I'm about to be a father." Just 2 weeks later, everyone went utterly pale when they saw me, but it wasn't because I was pregnant, it was because I stood frozen in the hallway, staring at Jax with his arm wrapped tightly around his ex-girlfriend. Everyone in that room knew. Everyone was celebrating. Everyone, except for me. But this wasn't just a betrayal, it was so much worse, because in the weeks that followed, I discovered that my entire life had been a meticulously planned lie. And they had absolutely no idea who they were messing with. I used to believe that knowing someone my whole life meant truly understanding them, that a shared history meant unwavering trust, and that family was forever. I was wrong about everything. My name is Ava Sterling. I'm 28, and I'm a project manager at a high-end fintech company in Manhattan. From the outside, my life looked perfect. A beautiful brownstone, a stable marriage, a fast-track career. People envied me. They thought I had it all, but they had no idea what I'd been through to get there, or the price I'd paid for that apparent stability. My life changed last year, on Christmas Eve. That was the night the blindfold finally fell off. The betrayal had been there for years, right under my nose, and I simply hadn't been able to see it. Let me rewind a bit. I need you to understand how I arrived at that moment. I've known Jackson Miller, or Jax, since the day I was born. Our parents were inseparable, the kind who spent every weekend together, took family vacations, and celebrated every single birthday. My parents were Jax's godparents, and his parents, Carol and Charles Miller, who I affectionately called Aunt Carol and Uncle Charles, were mine. It was a friendship that felt indestructible, built over decades. We grew up playing in the same parks, at weekend barbecues, birthday parties, and holidays. Jax was a part of my life even before I understood what that truly meant. But our lives were different, very different. My parents had money. My father was a successful entrepreneur, my mother a renowned architect. I attended the best private schools in the city. I had piano lessons, ballet, French tutoring. We traveled through Europe on vacation. We lived in a large, historic brownstone on the Upper East Side. Jax, on the other hand, went to public schools. His family lived in a simple house in a middle-class neighborhood of Queens. Uncle Charles worked as a manager at a construction supply store, and Aunt Carol was a secretary at a medical practice. They lived comfortably, but without luxuries. At the time, I didn't understand those differences. We were just kids playing together. But looking back now, I can see the signs. The way Aunt Carol would eye my mother's jewelry, how Uncle Charles would make comments about our house, our cars, our trips, always with a smile, always disguised as a joke. But there was something there, a sting of bitterness that I was too young to recognize. When I was 16, my parents were killed in a horrific car accident. It was a rainy October night. They were returning from an anniversary dinner when a truck lost control on the highway. There are no words to describe that time. Even now, 12 years later, a part of me remains paralyzed at the exact moment the police knocked on the door at 2 a.m. After the funeral, Aunt Carol and Uncle Charles moved into my house. They came to live with me, to take care of me, so I wouldn't be alone. I was a minor, an orphan, completely lost. They took me in. They were kind. They made sure to tell me that I would always have a family. At that moment, that saved me. Or so I thought. They managed my parents' estate until I turned 21. When I came of legal age, I discovered my parents had left me a considerable portfolio, for condos and the brownstone where we lived, all completely paid off. My parents had invested well. They had planned the future, a future they never got to live with me. Aunt Carol and Uncle Charles helped me with all the paperwork. They explained every detail. They were patient with my questions. When I turned 21 and could technically take charge of everything alone, they asked if they could continue living in the brownstone with me. They said it would be better for everyone if we stayed together. I didn't think twice. They were practically my family. They had cared for me during the worst years of my life. Letting them stay was the least I could do. Generosity. Gratitude. Naivety. 3 words that perfectly defined who I was back then. Jax and I started dating when I was 21. It felt natural. Everyone expected it. You're perfect for each other, they said. You grew up together. It's like destiny. He was attentive, affectionate. He seemed to understand me. He knew my history, my pain, my fears, or so I believed. 2 years later, we married. Aunt Carol helped me organize everything. We chose the dress together. She came with me to fittings. She gave her opinion on the flowers, the decor, the invitations. Your mother would love being here, doing this with you, she told me several times, tears in her eyes, and I believed she genuinely missed my mother, that she was filling that role out of love. On the wedding day, Uncle Charles walked me down the aisle. He took my arm, looked at me with that fatherly smile, and said, "Your father would be so proud of you today." I cried. I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was family love, and I allowed it because I trusted them, because I believed it was real love. Jax and I moved into one of the condos I had inherited. Jax said he wanted us to build our life together, and that we didn't need the big house. At first, it made sense. I worked a lot. I was focused on my career. He had started working as a trader, operating from home, investing in stocks and crypto. At least, that's what I believed he did. The other 3 condos were rented out. Jax offered to handle everything. You already work so much. Let me manage the properties. That way, you can focus on your career, and I'll handle this side of things. It seemed like a fair arrangement. He sent me monthly reports. He said he was reinvesting the profits, multiplying our wealth. I never questioned him. I trusted him completely. After all, why would I distrust him? He was my husband. He had grown up with me. His parents were my godparents. They lived in my house. We were family. 2 weeks before Christmas, Jax came home with a document. It was a power of attorney prepared by an attorney who worked with his family. It's just to make things easier, honey, he explained, smiling in that way that always reassured me. That way, I can renew rental contracts without having to bother you at work, handle bank matters, property registration issues. You'll be free to focus only on your job. I took the document and skimmed it quickly. Legal jargon always gave me a headache. I'll read it carefully later, I replied. I saw something flash across his face. It was fast. 9 a.m., I called the lawyer who had handled my parents' affairs. He had always told me that if I ever needed anything, I only had to reach out. Mr. Harrison, this is Ava Sterling, James and Isabel Sterling's daughter. I urgently need to speak with you. He must have detected something in my voice, because he didn't ask questions. He just said, "Come to my office." I showered, dressed, gathered all the property documents I had, the power of attorney Jax had given me, and drove downtown. Mr. Harrison's office was in an old brick building in the financial district. I had walked those stairs since I was a child, always accompanied by my father. It was a place that smelled of old paper and strong coffee. He greeted me with a hug. He was a man in his 70s with completely white hair and reading glasses hanging around his neck. He had been my father's attorney for over 20 years. "Sit down, Ava. Tell me what happened." I told him everything. The announcement at the party, the POA, the suspicion about the asset transfer. I spoke nonstop for almost 40 minutes. He listened in silence, taking notes, frowning at certain points. When I finished, he took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. Ava, I need to tell you something. My heart pounded. What is it? Your father and Charles were partners in a business many years ago, an import company. It did very well at first, but then it hit a rough patch. Charles wanted to retire and sell his share. Your father bought him out for a fair price. He assumed all the risk. Charles took the money and left. He paused, taking a sip of coffee. 2 years later, your father managed to turn the situation around. The company grew exponentially. That's how your family became wealthy. But I don't think Charles ever got over it. Your father told me this story years ago. By his account, Charles had accepted it well at the time. The families remained friends. The children grew up together. But now, seeing what's happening, I believe there was always resentment. Charles and Carol probably always looked at your family's life with bitterness. The class difference became very evident over the years, didn't it? You had everything, and they struggled financially. And when your parents died, you were a vulnerable teenager with a considerable inheritance. To resentful people, it must have looked like an opportunity. He looked at me seriously. Looking back now, with everything you've told me, it's clear that friendship always had a fragile foundation. The resentment over the business sale was likely never truly overcome, and you, Ava, became the perfect target. I felt as if a bucket of cold water had been thrown over me. So that was it. The resentment had always been there, hidden, and I never saw it. Nobody saw it, he clarified. Your father certainly didn't suspect anything, or he would have taken precautions. I closed my eyes. My parents never imagined that friendship concealed so much envy, so much greed. And now I was paying the price for the naivety of all of us. And this power of attorney? I asked, pushing the document across the table. Mr. Harrison put on his glasses and read it carefully. It took him nearly 15 minutes. He flipped pages, reread sections, made annotations. Finally, he placed the paper on the table and looked at me gravely. This gives Jax full authority over absolutely everything you own. He could sell the properties, transfer them, create mortgages, take out loans in your name, everything. With this document signed, you would lose complete control of your estate. I felt the anger surge again. And if I had already signed it, it would be very difficult to reverse. It would take years of litigation, and even then there would be no guarantees. The best-case scenario would be proving coercion or fraud, but that is extremely complicated in marital cases and properties. If we divorce, does he have a right to anything? Mr. Harrison smiled for the first time since I arrived. No. Everything you inherited is separate property. Under the law, inheritances received before or during the marriage do not enter into the community or marital property division. If you divorce today, Jax takes nothing. Absolutely nothing. Unless I voluntarily transfer the assets to his name, I murmured. Exactly. It was the only legal way they had to get what they wanted. I opened the folder I had brought and placed all the rental contracts on the table. I need you to review this. Jax has managed my properties for years. He says he reinvests the money, but I've never seen real proof. I want to know where that money has been going. Mr. Harrison spent the next 2 hours analyzing every document, every contract, every bank statement I had. He made calls, checked records, cross-referenced information. When he finished, his expression was grim. Ava, I am sorry to tell you this, but the rent money is being deposited into Jax's personal accounts, not joint or business accounts. He has been appropriating all the income from your properties. I took a deep breath. I expected it, but hearing the confirmation still hurt. And there's more, he continued. One of the condos has no proof of rent payment whatsoever. There's a contract, but no record of financial transactions. Someone is living there for free. Madison, I responded, his mistress. Mr. Harrison nodded. Most likely. I was silent for a moment, processing everything. What do I do now? First, do not sign that power of attorney under any circumstances. Second, immediately take back control of your properties. Third, if you really want to get to the bottom of this, we can hire a private investigator and discover where that money has gone. We are hiring a detective, I stated. I want everything documented. I want proof, and I want them out of my life. He smiled a sad smile, but with a flicker of pride. Your father would be very proud of the woman you've become. In the following days, I acted quickly and silently. Following Mr. Harrison's instructions, I hired a trusted real estate management company to take over the administration of my condos. I signed contracts granting specific, limited powers, very different from the general POA Jax wanted, and instructed them to notify all tenants immediately. Starting in January, all rents were to be paid directly to the management company. New contracts would be issued. Tenants had 1 week to sign or eviction proceedings would begin. I also called a security company and had discrete cameras installed throughout the brownstone. Small, almost invisible, strategically placed in the living room, kitchen, office, and patio. All included audio, all connected to an app on my phone, to gather more evidence against them. Jax returned from his trip on January 6th. I was home when he arrived, surrounded by suitcases. How was it, honey? How was New Year's? He asked, kissing me on the cheek, acting as if nothing was wrong, as if he hadn't just spent 2 weeks with his pregnant mistress and the family who was conspiring against me. Quiet. I worked quite a bit. Got ahead on some projects, I lied. Did you have time to look at that paperwork? There it was. The question I knew was coming. I smiled. Almost imperceptible. A clench of his jaw, a different glint in his eyes. But he quickly smiled again. Sure, no problem. Whenever you have time. I put the POA in a desk drawer and honestly forgot about it. Work was chaos. The company had a major project to close before the end of the year, and I was coordinating the entire team. The company Christmas party was scheduled for the afternoon of December 24th. It started at 6 p.m., and I had agreed with Jax that I would leave around 10 p.m. to head to his parents' place for the traditional family Christmas Eve dinner. It was always like that. Every Christmas Eve, the brownstone that had belonged to my parents was filled with Jax's relatives, his parents' friends, people I barely knew. I always went. I always smiled. I always appreciated being included, because I still believed I was lucky to have this family. That night, the company party was a little dull. Repetitive conversations, music too loud, drunk people discussing New Year's resolutions. Around 8 p.m., I decided to leave early and surprise Jax, arrive before planned, help with the final preparations. I drove toward the brownstone, listening to Christmas carols on the radio. It was cold, with a light drizzle falling. The streets were decorated with lights blinking in every window, that atmosphere of forced happiness that Christmas always brings. When I parked in front of the house, I realized it was packed. Cars everywhere, lights on in every room, music and laughter spilling onto the street. The party was already in full swing. I walked in the front door without knocking. I hung my coat in the foyer and headed toward the living room. The voices grew louder as I approached. I guessed there were about 20 people laughing, celebrating. And then I heard Jax's voice from the living room, clear and radiant. Madison is pregnant. We're going to have a son. The world stopped. I stood there in the hallway, partially hidden by the wall. No one had seen me arrive. From my angle, I could see the entire room. Jax was in the center, his arm around Madison. Madison was a friend of his from high school, his teenage ex-girlfriend. They had dated for years before Jax and I started. And there she was, smiling with a hand on her stomach, receiving hugs and kisses from everyone. Aunt Carol was crying with joy. Uncle Charles was applauding, shouting. Toasts were raised. Family friends congratulated them, saying things about how handsome the baby would be. I felt my legs give way. I leaned against the wall to keep from falling. Someone in the crowd shouted, "But what about Ava? Does she know yet?" The silence that followed lasted barely 3 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Jax gave a somewhat forced smile. Not yet. I need to sort out a few things first, some paperwork, but I'll tell her at the right moment. So, no one here says a word when she arrives. Everyone laughed. My heart pounded. Paperwork. He meant the power of attorney. There was a murmur of understanding in the room. Some people exchanged knowing glances. Aunt Carol nodded as if approving the strategy. Uncle Charles raised his glass to the future, and everyone toasted. In that moment, everything began to make sense. The way they reacted, those looks, that charged silence. Everyone there knew something I didn't. There was a secret, a conspiracy, and that power of attorney was the final piece of the plan. My stomach churned. It wasn't possible. I had to be hearing things. But Aunt Carol, my godmother, said loud and clear, "Finally, my son, after so many years, we are going to reclaim what is rightfully ours." And then I understood everything. Every smile, every gesture of affection, every word of comfort, it had all been a lie. A vast, elaborate lie spanning years. It wasn't love. It never was. It was a scam. I turned around, grabbed my coat, and slipped out of the house in silence. As quietly as I had entered, no one saw me. No one noticed. I got into the car, closed the door, and only then did the full reality hit me. I started to cry. Not a melodramatic movie cry, but a silent, painful sob that burned my chest and throat. Tears streamed down my face as I tried to process what I had just witnessed. My marriage was a farce. My husband had a pregnant mistress. Aunt Carol and Uncle Charles, my godparents, were involved in a plot to steal my inheritance, and everyone, absolutely everyone in that room, knew and was complicit. I drove back to the condo on autopilot. I don't remember the road. I don't remember stopping at traffic lights. I only remember crying and driving, crying and driving. When I got home, I wiped my tears, washed my face, and looked in the mirror. I barely recognized the person staring back. I looked smaller, more fragile. My phone vibrated. It was a message from Jax asking where I was. I took a deep breath and replied, "I decided to stay at the company party. It's more lively than I thought." He responded, "Okay, have fun. See you in 2 weeks. We're heading to Maui early tomorrow." Of course. The annual trip. Since we married, his family went to visit relatives in Hawaii for Christmas and stayed until the first week of January. They knew New Year's was always chaos at my firm, closing projects, reports, and every year I stayed behind while they went on vacation. I never questioned it. After all, it was their time. I just replied, "Okay, have a good trip." He sent, "Merry Christmas. Love you," with a heart emoji. I didn't respond. I locked my phone screen and tossed it onto the sofa. I sat on the living room couch in the dark and let the anger grow, because I realized one thing right then: the crying was over. There was no longer room for pain, sadness, or tears. There was only room for strategy. They thought I was an idiot. That I would always be that orphaned, lost girl, grateful for a family, trusting eternally, signing any paper, never questioning anything. They were wrong. I had grown up. I became a project manager because I was good at planning, organizing, anticipating problems, and creating solutions. I coordinated teams, managed crises, and made tough decisions every day. And at that moment, sitting in the darkness of my living room, I made the most important decision of my life. They wanted to play. We would play. But this time, by my rules. I stayed up all night. I didn't sleep. I just sat there, planning. First, I made a mental list of everything I knew. Jax was cheating on me with his ex, Madison. Madison was pregnant. His entire family and friends knew and supported it. The power of attorney was the final piece of a plan to transfer my assets to his family. I hadn't signed anything yet. This last point was crucial. I still had control of everything. I was still the owner of my properties, my accounts. Jax had no legal power over anything. As long as I didn't sign that document, he couldn't do anything. I spent Christmas planning, thinking through every detail, every move I would need to make. I made mental lists, drafted strategies, anticipated problems. This is how I worked as a project manager, and this is how I was going to handle this, too. The next day, December 26th, would put it all into practice. When the sun rose, I knew exactly what my first step would be. It to go wrong now. My stomach turned. The way she spoke about me, as if I were a burden, an investment that had to yield profit. I know, Mom, Jax said tiredly. You know, do you really know? Uncle Charles joined his wife. That company should have been ours, too. Half of that money, half of those condos, it should all be ours. But her father got greedy and bought my share when the company was doing badly. He kept all the profits when it improved, and then died, leaving everything to that spoiled kid. Aunt Carol shifted in her chair and continued. She grew up in the best schools. She had everything she wanted. She never worked a hard day in her life. Meanwhile, we were busting our backsides. Your father at that miserable store. Me at that clinic, watching them from afar with that luxury life that should have been ours too. Uncle Charles nodded. Exactly. That's why when they died, it was our opportunity, our chance to correct that injustice, care for the girl, earn her trust, and when she turned 21, be so close that she saw us as her family. And it worked. She let us live in her house. She trusted you to manage the condos. She married you. Everything was perfect until you messed it all up. Aunt Carol finished, looking at Jax with contempt. I didn't mess anything up, Jax slammed the table. The plan was to wait for her to sign the POA, transfer everything to my name, and then file for divorce. Done. Over. Everyone goes their separate way, but she didn't sign it. Not yet, but she will, Jax insisted. How are you so sure? Uncle Charles doubted. Jax hesitated. I think she will. I'll find a way. She trusts me. She trusted you, Aunt Carol corrected. After this property management company stunt, I don't know. She seemed suspicious. They fell silent for a few moments. I remained in the hotel room, heart racing, recording every second of that conversation. What about us? Madison asked. You said you don't have the rent money anymore. How are you going to support me? Support the baby? Jax ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. I don't know, Madison. I don't know. The money I had saved was used for the trip, and the rest I lost gambling. You lost it? Aunt Carol almost screamed. Jax, you promised you would quit. I didn't know I would be cut off from the rents this month. If I had known, I wouldn't have gambled everything. You're an idiotic boy, Uncle Charles said bluntly. A fool. And now, how are we going to pay the bills this month? I'll fix it, Jax insisted. But his voice lacked conviction. Madison started crying. You promised I wouldn't have to worry about money. I quit my job. I fought with my parents. I left home. You promised you would take care of me, that we would have a good life, that the baby would have everything. And now you tell me you have no money, that you gambled it all away. Madison, please. No. She stood up from the chair. I can't believe I was so stupid. All these years being the other woman, hiding, waiting, and for what? To end up pregnant, homeless, dependent on your parents' charity. Calm down, Madison, Aunt Carol said, without much sympathy. We'll solve this. And when we get the money, everyone benefits. You, the baby, everyone. But you have to be patient. Patient? Madison laughed humorlessly. I'm 4 months pregnant, Carol. In 5 months, I'll have a baby. I don't have time for patience. Well, you should have thought about that before you got pregnant, Aunt Carol retorted coldly. Have you never heard of birth control or condoms? The silence that followed was charged with tension. Finally, Uncle Charles broke it. We need a new plan. If Ava won't sign the POA willingly, we'll have to force her somehow. Force her? How? Jax asked. I don't know. Blackmail? Threats? Something that leaves her no option. Blackmail with what? Madison asked. She has nothing to hide. Her life is perfect, clean, proper. Everyone has something, Uncle Charles muttered. We just have to find what? Aunt Carol nodded thoughtfully. Or we create something, plant some evidence, something that compromises her. Then we offer a fix in exchange for the signature. I felt nauseous. They were seriously considering framing me for something fake just to get my signature. That's too risky, Jack said. More risky than losing everything? Uncle Charles countered. They spent a few more minutes discussing possibilities, each more absurd than the last. Finally, they decided to think it over and meet again in a few days. When they finally left, it was nearly 3 a.m. I turned off the camera, my hands shaking. This wasn't just a financial scam. It wasn't just infidelity. It was a conspiracy spanning over a decade, since my parents' death, perhaps even before. They had planned everything. Every gesture of affection, every word of comfort, every family moment, it had all been calculated, measured, executed with precision. And I had believed it all. When 7 a.m. arrived, I picked up the phone and called Mr. Harrison. He answered on the third ring, sleepy voice. But he became alert when he recognized my voice. Ava, what happened? I have everything recorded, the full confession. They admitted the marriage was a scam from the beginning, that they cared for me only to access the inheritance, and that now they are planning to blackmail or frame me to force me to sign the power of attorney. There was a silence on the other end. Are you safe? Yes. I'm in a hotel. They don't know where I am. Send me the recordings right now, and come to my office this afternoon. We are going to end this once and for all. At 2 p.m., I was in Mr. Harrison's office. He had already viewed the main recordings. His face was serious, his jaw tight. Ava, this is much worse than we imagined, he began, opening a thick folder on the table. But it's also much better for your case. How so? The detective I hired finished his investigation. We have concrete proof of everything. He turned his laptop towards me. Rents diverted to Jax's personal account for 5 years. Bank statements showing excessive spending on online betting, casinos, gambling websites. Jax is a severe gambling addict. My stomach churned, but it wasn't a surprise. I had discovered that last night. There's more, he continued, opening another tab. The trips to Maui were all a lie. The detective obtained flight and hotel booking records in their names. Every year, the four of them went to a luxury resort: Jack's, Madison, Uncle Charles, and Aunt Carol. Airline tickets, 5-star hotels, all paid with credit cards linked to the account where your rental income was deposited. He showed me the documents, reservation confirmations, credit card statements, plane tickets, all in their names, all paid with my money. The dates matched perfectly, between December 25th and January 6th for the last 5 years. While I stayed in Manhattan working, believing they were visiting relatives in Hawaii, they were partying with my money. What do we do now? He leaned back in his chair with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Now we legally destroy them. Immediate divorce on grounds of adultery and fraud. With this evidence, Jax gets not a penny. We evict Charles and Carol from your brownstone. We file a civil suit for misappropriation for all the diverted money, a theft charge for the jewelry, and we can even consider the criminal avenue. Let's do it, I replied without hesitation. Excellent. I will start preparing all the documentation. Everything will be ready to file with the court tomorrow morning. I spent 3 days in the hotel, monitoring every movement through the cameras. Jax and Madison were growing increasingly comfortable in my condo. She had practically moved in. Her things were scattered around the house. They behaved like a couple in every corner: the living room, the kitchen, my bedroom, every space profaned by their betrayal. On the third day's afternoon, watching another deplorable scene through the living room camera, I had an idea. I already had all the evidence I needed, but there was one thing I wanted to see in person. Something that had to happen to make my plan even better. I needed to catch Jax red-handed, and I needed Aunt Carol and Uncle Charles to find out from me. I waited for the right moment. On my phone screen, I saw Jax and Madison settle onto the living room sofa, drinking wine, laughing at something on his phone. They were completely relaxed. Perfect. I grabbed my keys and left the hotel. My condo was 10 minutes away. Throughout the drive, my heart beat fast, not from nervousness, but from a strange mix of rage and anticipated satisfaction. I parked in the building's garage. I took the elevator up. I walked down the hall to my door. I took a deep breath. I glanced one last time at my phone to ensure the moment was right, and I opened the door. The scene I found was exactly what I expected. But still, seeing it in person was different from watching it through a screen. Jax and Madison were on the sofa. She was sitting on his lap, wearing one of my silk nightgowns. They were kissing, his hands tracing her body with the familiarity of someone who had been doing it for years. The sound of the door opening made them separate immediately. Jax turned his head and went white. Literally white. All the blood drained from his face in 2 seconds. Ava, he yelled, pushing Madison aside and jumping up. You. Japan, you shouldn't be. Madison covered herself with a blanket, her eyes wide with panic. I stood in the doorway, observing both of them. I didn't say anything. I just watched. Ava, please let me explain, Jax began, taking steps toward me. This isn't what it looks like. Madison was, she needed a place to stay. I want a divorce. I cut him off. My voice came out firmer and calmer than I expected. He stopped, blinking several times. What, divorce? You cheated on me in my condo with your ex-girlfriend. Of course, I want a divorce. I watched the panic in his eyes be replaced by something more calculated. He was thinking, processing, trying to find an angle. Ava, let's talk calmly, he began, switching his strategy to a softer voice. You're angry. I get it, but there is nothing to talk about. I want you both out of my condo, now. Madison stood up, still clutching the blanket. I'm so sorry, Ava. Shut up, I said without looking at her. You owe me no apology. You owe me nothing. Just get out of my house. Jax took a step forward, and for the first time, I saw something dangerous in his eyes, an arrogance he had always hidden well. You won't be able to prove infidelity, he said in a low but firm voice. And even if you do, you'll have to pay me alimony and give me half your assets, including this condo. Good luck with a divorce, Ava. I smiled. I couldn't help it. A small, genuine smile. We'll see, I simply replied, and I left. I heard Jax calling after me in the hall, but I didn't look back. I got into the elevator, the doors closed, and finally, I let the smile widen. He really thought I had no proof. That I had stumbled upon it by chance just now. That I was stupid enough not to know that inheritance is separate property. Back in the car, I grabbed my phone and dialed Aunt Carol's number. She answered on the second ring, her voice cheerful. Ava, dear, how was Japan? I let my voice tremble as if I were crying. Aunt Carol, I came back early, and I caught Jax with another woman. Silence on the other end. What? She finally said. And by the tone, I knew the surprise was genuine. How? With another woman? Where? In our condo, I replied, putting all the pain I could muster into my voice. She was there. They were together, and she's pregnant, Aunt Carol. Oh my God, she murmured. I heard her take a deep breath. I don't know what to do, I continued, letting my voice crack. How could he do this to me? Ava, honey, where are you? Aunt Carol asked. And there was something in her voice. Concern? Or calculation? I'm in the car in the building garage. I can't go back into that condo. Not now. Come here. Come home. We'll talk. We'll fix this. I didn't answer immediately. I have to call a lawyer. I'm filing for divorce. Ava, you don't have to be so drastic. Let's talk. Maybe. He cheated on me, Aunt Carol. I cut her off, putting firmness in my voice. In my condo. There is no conversation that fixes this. You're right, she said after a moment. You're absolutely right. Leave it to me. I'm going to talk to him. That boy is going to hear it. I hung up and allowed myself to smile again. Now, all that was left was to wait for the show to begin. It didn't take a minute. Through the camera app, I saw Jax's phone ring. He looked at the screen, and his face became even paler. It's my mom, he told Madison, who was gathering her things scattered around the condo. He answered and immediately pulled the phone away from his ear. Even through the camera, I could hear Aunt Carol screaming. Are you stupid or just acting like it? How could you let her catch you in the condo with Madison? Can't you think with your upper head for 5 seconds? Mom, calm down. Can I explain? Jax tried to respond, but she wouldn't let him. Explain what? Years, Jackson. Years of planning, years taking care of that girl, earning her trust, building everything brick by brick, and you mess it all up because you can't keep your pants on? I had never heard Aunt Carol scream like that. The mask of the polite, kind woman had completely dropped. I'll fix it, Jax tried to say, but his voice was weak. Fix it? How are you going to fix it? She's filing for divorce. She already said she's filing for divorce. She has no proof. She can't prove adultery. She caught you in the condo with your pregnant mistress, you idiot. What clearer proof do you want? I heard Uncle Charles's voice. Aunt Carol must have put him on speakerphone because his voice came through clearly. You are an idiot, Uncle Charles said with a chilling calm that was worse than his wife's screams. A complete and utter fool. We trusted you. We gave you one single task: marry her, earn her trust. Make her sign the power of attorney, and you couldn't even manage that. I tried. She wouldn't sign. But I'll make her drop the divorce, Jax insisted, desperation in his voice. I'll talk to her. I'll apologize. How? Uncle Charles asked. Still with that terrifying calm. How are you going to make a woman who just caught you cheating drop the divorce? What arguments do you have? Silence. That's what I thought, Uncle Charles continued. You have nothing. We've lost everything because of you. We haven't lost it yet, Jax argued. But without conviction. She'll still have to give me half the assets in the divorce. Even with adultery, it's divided. Aunt Carol let out a bitter laugh. You really are dumb. Those properties are her inheritance. They don't enter into the split. She's divorcing you. You'll be left with nothing, and a pregnant mistress to support on top of it. Congratulations, Jax. You managed to ruin everything. I saw Jax slump heavily onto the sofa, phone still to his ear, his face in his hands. Can you come here? He asked in a weak voice. We need to do something. We need a plan. No, Aunt Carol said flatly. You got yourself into this mess alone. Now get yourself out of it alone. I'm fed up, Jax. Fed up with you. Fed up with this whole situation. And she hung up. Jax sat there staring at the phone for almost 5 minutes. Madison tried to approach, but he pushed her away. You need to leave, he told her coldly. Madison, now, and don't come back. But Jax, I have nowhere to go. That is not my problem now, he shouted, standing up. Go to your parents. Go wherever you want, but get out of here. I watched Madison start crying, hurriedly gathering her things, almost running out of the condo. Jax was left alone in the living room, pacing back and forth, picking up his phone, typing something, deleting it, typing again. He was sending me messages. I saw the notifications pop up on my phone. Ava, please let me explain. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness. I felt lonely. You've been gone a lot. I love you. I've always loved you. Can we fix this, please? I deleted all the messages without responding. I turned off the cameras and leaned back in the car seat. Phase 1 complete. Now, all that was left was to wait for tomorrow. The next morning, I woke up early. I had already asked Mr. Harrison to prepare everything for delivery that day. Promptly at 8 a.m., 2 court officers split up. One went to the brownstone where Uncle Charles and Aunt Carol lived. The other went to my condo where Jax was. I was in Mr. Harrison's office when my phone rang. It was Aunt Carol. I answered. Ava, she screamed. There was panic in her voice now. None of the contained rage from yesterday. Pure panic. What is this? An eviction notice? You're kicking us out? Yes, I replied simply. But why? What have we done? Try to talk this out, Ava, please. You can't do this. We have nowhere to go. We're old. We don't have money for. That is not my problem, I cut her off, using the exact words Jax had used with Madison the day before. But this is because of what Jax did. We have nothing to do with that. She almost laughed. Nothing to do with it? Seriously? Of course not. We are just as surprised as you are. That idiotic boy. Aunt Carol, I interrupted her, my voice turning cold. I know everything. The trips that weren't to Maui, the diverted rents, the plan you had since my parents' death. I know everything. Absolute silence on the other end. So yes, I continued. You have 30 days to get out of my house, and I suggest you use that time to find a good lawyer, because you're going to need one. I hung up before she could respond. 2 minutes later, my phone rang again. Jax. I answered. Ava, is this serious? He asked. And there was something different in his voice. Fear. Divorce, misappropriation, theft. You're suing me? Yes. But why those accusations? You don't have proof of all that, do you? Yes, I do. What proof? How? Security cameras throughout the condo, Jax, with audio installed days ago. I have the recording of you with Madison. I have the recording of the meeting in the kitchen where you all confessed the entire plan. I have documents proving the diversion of money, the fake trips, everything. Silence. You recorded us? He finally managed to say. I recorded you, and I've handed it all over to law enforcement. But that's illegal. You can't record people without their consent. Yes, I can. In my own condo, with my own security cameras, it's perfectly legal. I heard him breathe heavily on the other end. How much do you want? He finally asked. How much do you want to forget everything, to drop the lawsuits? $10,000? $20,000? How much? This time I genuinely laughed. Jax, do you really think I want money? I have money. What I want is justice and my assets back. Your assets were never not yours. No. And the $280,000 you diverted from the rents over 5 years. And my jewelry you stole and gave to your mistress. And the years of lies. I'll give it all back to you, with interest. Just drop the lawsuits. No, you have nowhere to sleep. How do you think you're going to give it back to me with interest? Ava, please. This will destroy me. It will destroy my parents. All of us. You should have thought about that before. Are you doing this for revenge because I cheated on you? I already apologized. No, Jax. I'm doing this because you spent over a decade planning a scam against me. Because you exploited my parents' death. You exploited my vulnerability, my trust. Because you are exactly the kind of person who deserves to pay for their crimes. Crimes? I just made bad decisions with our money. It's the risk of the business. You diverted money. You falsified contracts. You stole jewelry. You committed fraud. Those are felonies, Jax. And you will answer for them. I heard him start to cry on the other end. Not that manipulative crying he would probably use if we were face to face. It was a cry of genuine desperation. Please, he begged. I'm going to lose everything. I'll have nothing. Welcome to the club, I replied coldly. You were going to leave me with nothing, too. The difference is that I was smarter and discovered it first. I heard him swallow on the other end. My parents, he began, but his voice failed him. My parents are going to kill me. They're going to kill me for letting this happen. That is not my problem. Don't you understand? His voice became desperate. They're going to blame me for everything. They'll say I messed up their plan, that I was stupid, careless. And weren't you? I cut him off. You were stupid and careless. You let yourself get caught with your mistress. I didn't know you would come back early. I'm not just talking about that day, Jax. I'm also talking about Christmas Eve when you announced Madison's pregnancy to the entire room. When your parents talked about finally getting the properties they believed they were entitled to. When everyone toasted the future. Absolute silence on the other end. You were there. His voice was a thread. Yes. I also arrived early from the company party. I heard everything. I saw everything, and I left before anyone noticed. But you sent me a message later saying you were at the company party. Because I needed time, Jax. Time to process, time to plan, time to gather evidence. You thought I would be eternally stupid, eternally grateful, eternally blind. And I let you believe it while I prepared. Another silence, longer, heavier. So since Christmas, he murmured, as if processing it. You knew since Christmas. The trip to Japan, the cameras, it was all planned. Yes. But you destroyed yourselves. I'm just making sure you pay the consequences. And I hung up. I looked at Mr. Harrison, who had followed the entire conversation. How do you feel? He asked. I thought for a moment. Free? I finally replied. I feel free. He smiled. Your father would be proud. It took 2 months for everything to resolve. The divorce was fast because Jax had no way to fight. With all the evidence, his lawyer practically begged him to sign everything without opposing it. It's the only way out, I heard the guy say in the courthouse hallway. I watched Jax sign the papers. His hand trembled so much the pen nearly fell. He couldn't look me in the eye even once. I left there officially divorced. Officially the owner of everything that was always mine. The judgment for misappropriation came shortly after. $280,000 to be repaid. Aside from the jewelry, the judge determined a 30% wage garnishment. Only Jax had never had a real salary. He had never truly worked in his life. I suggest the defendant get a real job, the prosecutor almost laughed. And that's what happened. A few weeks later, Mr. Harrison told me that Jax had finally found a job, a server at a coffee shop in Queens. For the first time in his adult life, he was genuinely working, waking up early, wearing a uniform, serving customers, cleaning tables. The same guy who spent his days pretending to study charts in front of the computer, who lectured me about strategic investments, was now finally doing something productive. Uncle Charles and Aunt Carol had 30 days to leave the brownstone. On the last day, I went to conduct the inspection with the court officer. I expected it to be messy. I did not expect complete vandalism. Broken furniture, holes in the walls, spray-painted insults, shattered mirrors on the floor. They had destroyed everything they could before leaving. Uncle Charles was waiting for me at the door, glaring, satisfied. Of course not. And this damage. We have nowhere to go, Aunt Carol appeared behind him, crying. We're old. We have no money. You took everything from us. I took back what was always mine. You are the ones who spent years pretending it was yours. Your father robbed us. Uncle Charles took a step toward me, but the officers stepped in between us. That money was ours. My father bought your share. You chose to cash out. It wasn't his fault you gave up too soon, and it's certainly not mine. You'll regret this, Aunt Carol hissed. I won't, I said. But you will. Every single day. I turned around and walked away. I had the entire brownstone renovated. It took over a month, but it looked beautiful. I sold it in 2 weeks to a couple with 2 young children. They were radiant, making plans about how they would decorate each room, about the birthday party they would hold in the garden. I hope they are happy there. That house deserved good stories. I also sold the condo where I lived with Jax. I didn't even go back inside. I couldn't have. I hired people to empty everything, remodeled it, and sold it furnished to an investor who didn't even want to see it in person. Of the 5 properties I inherited, I kept only the 3 condos that had always been rented. I left everything in the hands of the management company. The monthly rent was more than enough for me to live well, and I had the sale money invested. Through mutual friends, I kept getting updates. Jax and Madison broke up. She never forgave him for kicking her out that night, pregnant and with nowhere to go. The humiliation, the desperation, the coldness with which he threw her out, all of that killed whatever existed between them. Madison made peace with her parents and moved back home. They welcomed her with open arms, happy to have their daughter and the grandchild on the way, even under the difficult circumstances. Jackson, on the other hand, was completely alone. He had cut ties with his parents after everything that happened. The accusations, the screaming, the insults they exchanged when they realized they had lost everything were irreversible. Charles and Carol never even got to meet their grandson. Jackson rented a room in a shared apartment in a bad neighborhood. He worked at the coffee shop. He returned every day to an empty room. He slept alone, without Madison, without his son, without his parents, without anything. Charles and Carol were in a tiny, cramped apartment across town. Charles returned to doing construction side jobs despite his age and battered body. Carol found work as a secretary at a pet supply store, earning minimum wage. The family that had planned everything so carefully had shattered, separated, alone, bitter, each blaming the other for the disaster they had created. 3 months after the divorce, I packed my bags and left Manhattan. I had no reason to stay there anymore. I chose Denver, Colorado, because it was close enough not to be dramatic, but far enough to be a true new beginning. I bought a small 2-bedroom house with a front yard. Nothing luxurious, nothing extravagant. I painted the walls the colors I liked. I hung photos of my parents. I planted roses in the garden because my mother loved roses, and hydrangeas because my father said they were the most beautiful. Waking up early and tending to the garden became my favorite routine, watering, pruning, watching things grow. A slightly obvious metaphor, I know, but it calmed me. Little by little, I started meeting people. The neighbor who makes incredible cookies and always shows up with a fresh batch when she realizes I'm home. The owner of the corner coffee shop who already knows my order by heart. A group that meets to walk in the park every morning. People who knew me as Ava, the one who moved from New York and likes gardening, not as Ava, the one who was nearly destroyed by those who claimed to be her family. It was good to be just myself, without baggage, without explanations. I quit my job in Manhattan. The firm was disappointed. They offered me a raise, a promotion, anything to make me stay. But I needed distance from everything. I continued working as a consultant for them, but remotely now, on specific projects when and how I wanted. Nothing that consumed me. I traveled quite a bit. France, Italy, Japan, this time for real, experiencing the places, trying the food of each country, taking pictures. Mr. Harrison calls me every month, always the same day, the same time. He tells me silly things about his office, asks how I am. Sometimes he updates me on some legal matter. Jax tried to appeal the wage garnishment again, he told me the other day. The judge denied it. That's the 5th time now. We laugh. He is the closest person I have to family today. And yet there is a part of me that doesn't open up completely to him, that maintains that safe distance. It's been 3 years since that Christmas Eve. I wake up every day in my Denver home. I make coffee. I sit on the porch, looking at the garden. The roses are beautiful, the hydrangeas, too. I haven't seriously dated anyone in these 3 years. I've gone out with a few people, had pleasant dinners, good conversations, but nothing went past 3 or 4 dates. Last month, a very nice guy, a friend's brother from the walking group, tried to hold my hand. We had been out 3 times. It was going well. I pulled away without thinking. Pure instinct. I'm sorry, I told him. I'm not ready yet. He was super understanding. No pressure. We'll go at your pace. 2 weeks later, he he stopped calling. I don't blame him. Nobody wants to wait for someone who might never be ready. And maybe I never will be. Because when you spend years believing you have a family, trusting with your eyes closed, and you discover that everything was a giant lie from day one, something breaks inside you. Now I look at everyone slightly sideways, looking for the trick, the lie, the ulterior motive. It's exhausting. It's lonely. But it keeps me safe. Sometimes I wonder if it's fair to myself, to the people who cross my path, to wear this trauma like armor against everyone. But then I remember. I remember trusting blindly, never doubting, and the price I almost paid. And then I think, okay, maybe it's lonely, but it's safe. And after everything, safety is worth more. What I've learned is that being alone doesn't mean being empty. I fill myself with other things. The books I read on the porch, the trips I take, the garden I plant, the house I decorate to my taste, the friends I have chosen to keep close, even if always at that prudent distance. This morning, having coffee on the porch with a bird singing in the garden tree, I realized something. I am happy. Not in the way I imagined when I was younger, without a husband, without children, without that magazine cover life. But I am happy in my own way, in my own time, on my own terms. Perhaps someday I will trust someone again. Perhaps not. And it's okay if that day never comes, because the true inheritance my parents, James and Isabel, left me was not the money or the properties. It was the ability to always get back up, no matter how many times I am knocked down. And no one can take that from me. I finish my coffee, look at the flowers, feel the breeze, and smile, because today I choose to keep moving forward. And that is enough.